Everyone, sorry I can't be there in person. I can't see anyone, but I can imagine you're all there. So I'm Laura Bedford, and I'm the head of programs at Kids in Museums. Just for a visual description, I am a white woman in her 40s. I've got mid-length brown hair, and I've got black-rimmed glasses on. And today I'm going to be talking about creating family-friendly museums, and just a little bit of an overview about what I'm going to be talking about this afternoon. So providing a range of practical ideas to inspire the family-friendly provision in a range of organisations. And then if we've got time, because I know you're running a little bit behind, I'm going to be sharing how you can use our self-assessment audit tool to kind of audit your museum based on our manifesto, and also talk about other ways you can get involved with Kids in Museums work, such as Takeover Day, but we'll see how we go at the end. So in terms of Kids in Museums, for those of you who haven't heard of us before, we are a small charity and we work with museums, heritage sites and cultural organisations across the UK to make them more welcoming and inclusive for children, young people and families. And we do that in a variety of different ways. So we have our 6-point manifesto, which is put together with children, young people and families about what makes a really good museum day out. It's free to sign up to. We have over 1,000 museums signed up across the UK and the world. And I'll be talking a lot more about our manifesto as we go through this morning's session. Sorry, this afternoon session has just gone past lunchtime. We've got our annual Family Friendly Museum Award, and that's the only museum award in the UK that's judged by families. And again, if we've got time at the end, I'll talk a bit more about this. But basically, if you want to nominate your museum this year, then the deadline for nominations is the 3rd of June. We have Takeover Day, and that's where children and young people can take over staff roles for the day. And that takes place on the 22nd of November this year. And this year's theme is careers. We have over 100 online resources on our website around kind of helping you to be more welcoming and inclusive for children, young people and families. And I'll be signposting some of these in my presentation. So I think a copy of the presentation is going out to you after the session today, and there'll be lots of useful links that you can explore at your own leisure. We also offer training and consultancy work, so we do national training that's available online, usually charged for training, and we also do consultancy work with individual organisations across the UK, things like doing audits of museums, see how family friendly they are, and things like bespoke training around kind of being more family friendly for your front of house team, so lots of different things. So I thought before I started to sort of delve into our manifesto, I thought it might be useful to give a little bit of context about what kinds of families visit museums and why are family visitors it's so important to museums. So when we did our manifesto consultation with this audience, we found that families didn't just visit with their parent carers, but also a range of other family members and also friends of the family as well. And thinking about kind of opportunities and barriers for families to visit. So Age UK found that around 40% of grandparents were doing regular childcare for their grandchildren. So some museums have adapted their provision for this, this kind of family audience, and have even provided grandparent tickets, so grandparent family tickets are available at some organisations in the UK. Also, around 15% of families in the UK are single parent families, and single parents have kind of fed back to us at Kids in Museums to say that if you do have a flexible family ticket, so that it's sort of thinking about having more flexible family tickets. So if you have, like, say, a 2-parent carer ticket with 2 or 3 children, can you think about having a single parent family ticket as well? Because that really helps them have a discount as well. Thinking about the different age groups of children that will be visiting museums. So obviously kind of an experience of visiting with the under 5 is very different from an older child. So usually with an under 5, they're the ones that kind of lead the visit and their kind of needs are being met first, really. So it's just thinking about those different age groups, and more about that later. And pupils with additional support needs. So as we heard from the first speaker from this morning, around 1/3 of pupils in Scottish schools have additional learning needs. So just thinking about those families visiting your museum and making sure they're supported and they're able to visit with their family as well. So in terms of motivations for visiting museums, so families have told us they really like to visit museums to entertain, educate and socialise with their children, and also to make memories as well. And a decade-long US study found that if people visited museums as a child, they were 3 to 4 times more likely to visit as adults. So it's thinking about those kind of sort of future adult visitors that will come to you. So if you've had a really good time as a child, they're more likely to come back to you as adults. And Kids in Museums looked at barriers to participation back in 2016, and a lot of these still, unfortunately, remain today. So in terms of practical barriers for family visiting museum, that could be transport costs, or actually transport, being able to get to your museum, particularly if they don't have a car and you're in a rural area. Things like economic barriers, particularly at the moment with the cost of living crisis. That can mean they can't actually visit your museum because they can't afford to pay entry costs if you're a charge for a museum, or spend money in your shop or cafe. Social national barriers, so if they didn't have a good time when they were children visiting a museum, they might be less likely to want to come back and visit you when they've got their own families. Pressure on partners, so we heard again from this morning's speaker around kind of school changes, and kind of how that a lot of school visits can really kind of then result into family visits as well, because if the children have had a really good time, they really want to kind of pester their parents into wanting to come back to the museum and show their family around. And we know that in terms of kind of pressures on schools, like curriculum changes, obviously COVID had a big impact on school visits to museums, and now with the cost of living crisis, things like transport costs come in, and that's a big barrier for schools visiting your museum. And poor collaboration as well, so museums actually not finding out from families, children or young people what they want from a museum visit. So looking at kind of non-visitors and sort of pulling out this research that Derby Museums did. So they looked at kind of non-visiting families who hadn't been visiting their museums before they created their Museum of Making. And they found that the sort of main competitors for them were places like sort of going to the cinema, other leisure activities, things like theme parks. And unlike the families that were visiting museums, they found that actually a lot of families didn't like the educational side of museums, and they thought they wouldn't have fun. And they were really worried about the kind of not being able to make noise and not being able to be themselves in a museum as well. So just thinking about those things around sort of barriers and attitudes to museums. I think sort of bringing us up to date. So Creative Scotland did some research last year, which came out in April last year, about the cost of living crisis. And one of the things they found was that unfortunately family groups are the most likely to be impacted by the cost of living crisis, but that 22% of families and 25% of young people were actually stated that arts and cultural activities really helped them, and they felt they were still really important even though there was the cost of living crisis going on. So moving on from context around kind of family visiting museums, I thought I'd talk about our manifesto. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it's basically put together with children, young people and families. We've got 6 points, which I'll go through. It can be used as an audit tool, and I'll be talking more about how to do that a bit later. It can also show your commitment to being a family-friendly organisation, and if you sign up to our manifesto, which I said is free, you get this logo which you can put on your website or your marketing, so that you can show that commitment to that audience. It can also be used as an advocacy document. So if you're struggling to kind of convince your trustees or sort of senior management in your organisation that you should be more family friendly, then the manifesto can really help you with that, because it's seen as the industry standard. So let's move on to our manifesto and think about manifesto point 1. So that's all about being welcoming. So being made to feel safe and welcome can make or break a family visit. Create an environment where families can explore, have fun, play and learn together. Ensure staff and volunteers provide a warm welcome and make interactions with all family members accessible, friendly and informative. Include things that can be touched and make labels clear to explain when they can't. Welcome enthusiastic comments, always keep instructions positive, and provide easy to read text for all ages. So I'm going to bring out a few of those things from this manifesto point, sort of a few practical things you could think about doing in your museum. So first of all, thinking about what interactions are like for families throughout your visit. So not just when they come through the building, come through the doors, but also throughout your galleries. So how family friendly are your volunteers or staff in your museum? And are they just talking to the adults in the group, or are they talking to the whole family, including the children? So that's something that that families really feed back to us, can make or break a visit, having that really family friendly, sort of being made to feel supported and welcome in your environment. Just an example here from Wash Museum, which was one of our family-friendly museum award-win shortlisted museums from a few years ago. They found they had a lot of volunteers, and the volunteers helped out on family days, but families were feeding back to say that they wanted a bit more help from those volunteers, but they couldn't identify them because the museum couldn't afford to pay out for uniforms for them. So what they did is they got these sashes with Here to Help, and they gave them out to all the volunteers to wear during these busy events, and that really helped families to kind of identify them, but also help them on the visit. Also thinking about how your activities are communicated to families when they arrive at a museum. So are they greeted by a member of staff or a volunteer, particularly on busy days? Is that volunteer or member of staff able to kind of explain everything that a family can do during a visit? A way around that is to actually just have a poster available or some signage in your main entrance, just listing what they can do. So if there's trails available or family activities they can drop in to do. So an example here is from Leeds City Museum, who are a family-friendly museum award winner a few years ago now. They've got a mascot, this tiger, and they use that tiger to kind of use the signage around the museum, highlighting family-friendly areas, but also what they can do on that day. And thinking about what you can and can't touch in a museum. So for families, they really tell us they get very confused about particularly kind of objects on open display. And if there's no signage on it, they don't know if they can or can't touch these items. So just being really clear and about why you can or can't touch these items. So the example here from the National Civil War Centre, and they're just talking about the fact you can't touch this deed's chest because of woodworm. So it just provides that information for families so they know what they can and can't do. And thinking about interpretation as well, so one bugbear from families, they always feed back to us, is that particularly if they've got smaller children, they don't have a lot of time to wade through a lot of text panels to find the answer to their children's questions. So having really short and concise information is really useful for them. Just thinking about your interpretation in the museum. We know this is not a quick fix, but particularly if you're kind of updating displays, it can really help families. So moving on to point 2, which is being accessible to all. So ensure all visitors are equally supported and welcome. Families face many challenges when visiting museums, including economic, language and cultural barriers. Consider the costs and practicalities of a whole museum visit from the perspective of a family. A deaf, disabled and neurodivergent people may experience barriers to accessing your space, activities, displays and digital resources. Families need clear online information, such as an access page, to confidently plan their visit. Consider a full spectrum of access needs, review your provision and consult with a range of families about making a visit more accessible. So just a few points under this one. So unfortunately, Ecclesiastical back in 2019, they found that around 29% of parents with children with additional needs felt unwelcome in the museum, and unfortunately even being asked to leave the museum because their behaviour was misunderstood by front of house staff or volunteers, and that's compared to only 13% of children without additional needs. So it's just thinking about making sure your front of house staff are kind of aware that there might be different kind of behavioural things that are going on with different families come into your museum, and making everyone feel welcome, and thinking also about how you can enable families to plan their visits. So something that is really important is having an access page on your website that's easy to find. That's something that someone we work with called Sam Bowen, who runs Sending Museums, you might have heard of her. She always says that's your shop window, so make sure that's really clear. Also, if you can provide a visual story or social story, that can not just help families with autistic children, but actually all types of visitors, even older people with living with dementia as well, can really help them plan their visits. And also having a sensory backpack or a sensory bag with lots of things like ear defenders, magnifying glasses, torches, can really help families as well. So if you want more information about how to create those visual stories or sensory bags, we have some really good links at the end of this presentation, but also the Sending Museums website is really a fantastic resource. It's free, and it's got lots of really good sort of top tips around how to create these things. So thinking about economic barriers as well, so that museum I mentioned at the beginning, Area Wash Museum, they are in an area of quite high deprivation. So what they wanted to do is actually kind of assess how accessible a family day out at the museum was for one parent and three children. So they worked out what you could do for free, what you could do as a sort of medium cost, and then if you wanted to do everything, what would be the top cost you would actually pay for that. So it might be a good exercise for you to think about that in your own organisation and just see what's affordable in your museum. So moving on to Manifesto point 3, make it easy and comfortable. So families really told us they're more likely to stay longer at your museum if the facilities and spaces are family friendly. So provide seating for all generations to enjoy a rest, a quiet space and free Wi-Fi, make pocket money items available in the shop. Can you make your cafe family friendly and reasonably priced? Provide a picnic area or direct people to eateries nearby. Having baby changing facilities, a breastfeeding welcome attitude, and somewhere to keep buggies is important for those with younger visitors. Can you provide a changing places toilet or signpost visitors to the nearest facility? So just bringing out a few points from this one. So in terms of buggies, it's sort of thinking about, can you allow buggies around your museum? If you can't, making that really clear on your website so that families can plan for that in advance. And also providing things like a buggy park, even if that's a temporary space that you put up, say some barriers around and a sign up during busy days, but just so that families can think about how they're going to plan their visit if they are bringing a buggy to your museum. Thinking about toilets as well. So how family friendly are your toilets? For example, are your sinks quite high and your hand dryers quite high up on the wall? So does that mean that parent carers have to lift up their children to use those things? So if you can provide a step stool, that can really help families with smaller children. And also, if you can provide things like spare nappies, wipes, and also free period products, and actually advertise that. So even if they're not available to sort of pick up in the toilets, can you pick them up from, say, your reception desk? So particularly in the cost of living crisis, or the fact that if you are a rural museum and you're kind of far away from facilities, that can really help families on a visit, particularly those with smaller children. And thinking about picnics as well, so families are the most likely audience to want to take their own food to a museum. So can you provide an indoor picnic space for them or an outside area, or can you signpost families to other places locally that they can do that? So thinking about seating, so families told us that it's not just those families with older sort of parent carers or grandparents that like a rest in your museum, all families like a little break. Thinking about being breastfeeding welcome as well. So you can sign up to the Breastfeeding Friendly Scotland as a breastfeeding business or organisation, and you can use the logo to put in your entrance or put on your website just to show that you are breastfeeding welcome. Thinking about your shop, so you provide things like pocket money items that families can buy. And if you've got a cafe, thinking about either having smaller portions of adult things that you sell in the cafe, or a children's menu can really help families on a visit. And just think, if you want kind of more advice on kind of being a family-friendly cafe or a shop, we do have lots of resources on our website. And also last year we launched our family cafe standard as well. It's a charged for thing that you can get accreditation for, but do have a look at our website if you want to find out more. So moving on now, remember, families come in all different shapes and sizes. Consider what different family members need from their visit and provide ways for them to enjoy themselves together. Family groups can be diverse, from large multi-generational families to single parent carers. They can include under fives, young people, children with additional needs, same-sex couples and grandparents. Reflect this diversity in your language, activities, displays and ticketing. So in terms of this, it's just thinking about, do you know who your family visitors are? So do you do things like visitor surveys, and do you actually capture that data? So do you find out who's visiting as a family and what the age of the children are that are visiting you? Do you do things like collecting postcodes or children's ages on arrival? And that can really help you to kind of aim your provision for the right audience and the right ages. You can also, oh, sorry, are we all right for time? Yeah, okay, I'll carry on. So just thinking about if you've not just aiming your provision at primary school age children, but also thinking about under fives as well. So just an example here from the Andrew Carnegie Birthplace Museum, who one of our winners from the past, they provided these little laminates, lanyards with kind of things that you can spot around the museum, and the children really enjoyed wearing those and kind of felt like a member of staff in the museum. So just a simple thing to do for under fives. And thinking about what young people want to do in a museum as well. So we've got these photo challenge trails from People's History Museum, which young people have co-created with the museum. So if you can kind of work with young people, even if it's a work experience student, that can really help to kind of really think about your provision and your resources for that age group. So moving on, because I know we haven't got a lot of time left, communicate well. So make sure you let families know everything you have to offer them. You can do this through outreach visits, posters and leaflets, and your website and social media. Provide easy to find pre-visit information online, information on arrival, and a way for families to get in touch and give feedback. Make sure all content is accessible, represent a diverse range of families in your marketing images. So just 3 things to point out from this this manifesto point. So when we did our manifesto consultation, families told us the main 3 ways they wanted to find out information about a museum was through Facebook, their website, and a newsletter. So in terms of family newsletters, if you do have the capacity to do this and the resource, it's just thinking about how you kind of have family-friendly imagery or kind of welcome. So an example here is from the Natural History Museum. So they've used their whale and a really sort of fun playful way to kind of open the newsletter. In terms of social media, so can you provide images of families having a good time in your venue? If you're not able to take photographs of families or have lots of photographs of families, it's just thinking about other ways you can do that. So an example here from the Coventry Transport Museum is during their play sessions, they kind of did a before and after, so you can see how much fun the families had, even though families aren't actually in the images themselves. In terms of your website, so an example here from Andrew Carnegie Birthplace Museum, they've just got this really nice logo with kind of 6 things you can do in the museum. So it gives a really good idea of what you can do and what you can expect before you visit for families, so they can plan their visits. Also some really nice TripAdvisor reviews, and they've got an FAQ section as well. And just to say that we do have a family-friendly website template that you can use on our website. So if you want to create your own family page, it can be a really good way to do that. And finally, be an active part of your community. So young people and families want to see museums help tackle inequalities, support their well-being, and take care of the local environment. Consult and collaborate with a diverse range of children, young people and families in your community as equal partners on events, displays and exhibitions. This will help you to make your site more relevant, to reflect their stories and give this audience a stronger sense of ownership over their histories and heritage. So again, going back to Leeds City Museum, they have kind of co-created with families throughout their museum. They show artwork from families that have taken part in their holiday activities in a display case by their shop. They've got a community corridor where they co-create with lots of different local organisations and partners, and that includes young people's organisations and family organisations as well. And in all of their temporary exhibitions, they work with their youth panel, which they've had for around 10 years now, to co-create exhibitions, but also to kind of make interventions. So an example here is an interpretation panel from the Michael Murgo exhibition, so the Warhorse author. So they got the young people from their youth panel to create interpretation panels as part of that exhibition. So that was a really quick kind of run through our manifesto points. And I know that you're probably into lunch now, so very quickly to say that you can use our Kids in Museums manifesto self-assessment tool to kind of in your own organisation as an internal tool. So we would recommend that you kind of consult with particularly front of house teams to sort of have a go at this as well. So it goes through all the manifesto points. You can score how well you think you're doing under each point, and then to make sure you're not missing out on kind of celebrating your strengths. We have a reflection table where you kind of look at your strengths as an organisation, but make sure you're sharing that with other colleagues. And then thinking about weaknesses and opportunities, so you can think about where you might want to make improvements to your provision and how you might do that. We also got some funding advice at the end with a few links to funding organisations you could think about approaching to fund this work as well. And then finally, I'm just going to just say that in terms of kind of keeping in touch with kids in museums, that's our website. You can email me. We're on social media, and you can sign up to our mailing list to find out more about things like new resources, training as well. So that's just a very quick run through, but hopefully you're not too much into lunchtime there. But if anyone's got any questions, please let me know.